Just off the rugged coast of Maine, about 2.5 miles from the mouth of the Kennebec River, stands Seguin Island Lighthouse, a lonely sentinel perched high on a bluff, overlooking waters that have seen centuries of shipwrecks, storms, and whispered legends. Though beautiful in its isolation, the island is no gentle paradise. Mariners feared the shoals and currents, lighthouse keepers feared the loneliness, and visitors have long whispered of ghostly presences that still wander the wind-battered halls. Seguin Island Lighthouse is the highest of all Maine's lighthouses, rising more than 180 feet above sea level, and it has guided sailors since 1795. Yet its story is as tragic as it is heroic, one of isolation, accidents, madness, and restless spirits. This is the tale of Seguin Island Lighthouse, its history, its tragedies, and the spectral legends that refuse to fade. The origins of Seguin Island Lighthouse date back to the presidency of George Washington. Recognizing the perilous nature of the Kennebec River entrance, its shifting currents, hidden rocks, and thick fog, Washington ordered the construction of a light station in 1795. The first structure was a wooden tower with a simple system of oil lamps. But the sea soon proved the inadequacy of that first attempt. Storms battered the wood, and by 1819, a more permanent stone tower replaced it. Over the decades, improvements continued, culminating in 1857 with the installation of a grand Fresnel lens imported from France, a first-order lens, the largest type available, sending its beam for miles across the dark waters. This lens, still in place today, remains one of the few original first-order Fresnel lenses still in service in the United States. The lighthouse was a marvel of engineering and necessity, yet it was also a post of profound loneliness. Keepers and their families lived cut off from the mainland, often snowbound in winter and fogbound in summer. With no electricity and no easy means of communication, their days were consumed by tending the light, polishing brass, and battling the crushing weight of solitude. Life for keepers on Seguin was both vital and brutal. Their duty was to keep the light burning, for even a single lapse could spell disaster for a ship at sea. But isolation often gnawed at their minds. Resupply ships sometimes could not reach the island for weeks. Winters were harsh, and fog was relentless. So much so that Seguin was equipped with a powerful foghorn, infamous for its unending drone that rattled the nerves of anyone stationed there. One account speaks of keepers begging for relief from the sound, which could be heard for miles. Some said it drove them half mad. Others claimed it seeped into their dreams, becoming the voice of the sea itself. It was under these conditions that tragedy struck again and again. One of the most enduring and haunting tales of Seguin Island is that of a young lighthouse keeper and his wife in the mid-19th century. The couple arrived on the island newly married, full of hope, but the bleakness of their assignment soon wore thin. The wife, young and spirited, grew restless and despondent under the weight of isolation. To cheer her, the keeper ordered a piano to be delivered to the island, a rare and costly luxury. When it finally arrived, the piano came with a single piece of sheet music. She began to play it, over and over again, day after day, until the repetitive tune filled the stone house endlessly. The story goes that the incessant melody drove the keeper into a state of despair and madness. One night, unable to endure it any longer, he took an axe and destroyed the piano. Then, in a fit of rage or madness, he turned the axe on his wife, killing her. Some versions say he then took his own life, while others claim he lived out his days in sorrow on the island. Whether fact or folklore, the story persists. Visitors and keepers alike have reported hearing the faint tinkling of piano music drifting through the foggy night air, a ghostly echo of the keeper's doomed attempt to ease his wife's suffering. The waters surrounding Seguin Island are notoriously merciless. The rocky shoals, sudden currents, and dense fog that rolls in from the Atlantic have claimed countless vessels over the centuries. Mariners knew that even the strongest ship could be torn apart by the sea's capricious fury if caught near the island, and the lighthouse's beacon was often the last hope of survival. From the earliest years of the lighthouse, tragedies unfolded with cruel regularity. Keepers were acutely aware of this, for their duties were not merely to tend the light. They were often first responders to maritime disasters. There are detailed accounts in the lighthouse's historical logs of men sent to the water's edge to retrieve bodies, sometimes dozens at a time, and to provide basic burials on the windswept island. One particularly grim event occurred in the autumn of 1838. A merchant vessel, the Hannah Elizabeth, laden with lumber and trade goods, misjudged the currents in the thick fog. Despite the beam of Seguin Island's light, the ship ran aground on hidden rocks just offshore. The lighthouse keepers, stationed high on the bluff, could hear the panicked shouts of the crew as waves pounded the hull. The storm was relentless, and there was nothing the keepers could do to save the ship. By dawn, the tide had claimed most of the vessel. Only a few survivors made it to the rocky shoreline, their bodies bruised, cut, and frozen from the frigid waters. The keepers had to navigate the jagged rocks to bring the survivors to the lighthouse. They worked tirelessly, wrapping them in blankets and tending to injuries. But the Hannah Elizabeth's voyage had ended in disaster, and its cargo, along with the lives of many aboard, was lost to the sea. It was not only large ships that met their end near Seguin Island. Fishing boats, schooners, and small coastal craft were equally vulnerable. During winter, when storms swept across the Atlantic with sudden fury, waves could reach higher than the island itself. Keepers would often watch helplessly as boats were tossed against rocks or capsized in the churning surf. One log entry from 1872 recounts the sorrow of retrieving the bodies of fishermen who had gone out to earn their livelihoods, only to vanish in a single stormy night. The relentless frequency of such disasters created an aura of unease around the lighthouse. Keepers spoke quietly of hearing voices in the wind, the cries of those who had perished in the waters below. Some sailors' families would leave small tokens or notes on the island, hoping their loved ones' spirits could find peace. Over time, the island became a resting place not just for human bodies, but for the lingering echoes of lost souls. It was during the harsh winter of 1895 that the most haunting tragedy occurred. A transport schooner carrying coal from the mainland to Portland ran aground near the northern tip of the island. The storm had been relentless for 3 days, and the ship's crew was exhausted. When they saw the light of Seguin Island, they thought relief was near, but the rocks claimed the vessel before they could reach safe harbor. The lighthouse keepers watched in horror as the waves carried away men one by one. In the aftermath, they counted only 2 survivors. For weeks, the survivors' voices were recorded in the log, detailing the horrors they had witnessed, describing the water's power and cruelty, and speaking of shadowy figures rising from the waves, phantoms perhaps, or visions born of trauma and hypothermia. Some of the keepers claimed to see similar figures when patrolling the cliffs, sailors in tattered clothing, faces gaunt and eyes wide, staring back at them before vanishing into the fog. By the turn of the 20th century, Seguin Island had become synonymous with maritime disaster. The lighthouse stood as a proud beacon of hope, but also as a silent witness to the countless lives claimed by the sea. Local fishermen and mariners began referring to it in hushed tones as the Watcher of the Lost, for those who died near the shoals seemed to linger around the island, unwilling or unable to move on. The tragedies at sea left indelible marks on the island, not only in memory, but, according to legend, in spirit. Tales of hauntings began to circulate among keepers as early as the mid-1800s. Some dismissed these accounts as folklore, But for those who lived through the isolation and bore witness to death and destruction, the stories were very real. One of the earliest recorded incidents involved keeper Thomas Harlow, who served on the island in the 1860s. Harlow was a man of practical sensibilities, skeptical of ghost stories, but even he could not ignore the occurrences that began shortly after a particularly brutal winter storm. Doors would open and close on their own. Heavy footsteps could be heard pacing the halls when no one else was present, and the smell of salt water mingled with tobacco smoke, though no one had been smoking. Harlow described in his log an evening when he was awakened by the distinct sound of dragging chains. Investigating, he found nothing, no chains, no intruders, but the sound persisted for hours, echoing throughout the lighthouse quarters. By morning, he was pale and trembling, convinced that the spirits of drowned sailors had returned to the place where their lives had ended. Stories like these multiplied as years passed. Keepers spoke of lights flickering in the tower when the lamp was not in use, of cold spots that would form suddenly in rooms long sealed from drafts. Some claimed to see spectral sailors pacing the grounds, silently watching, perhaps waiting for the chance to finish their fateful journey to safety. Visitors to Seguin Island today continue to report similar phenomena. Volunteers often speak of hearing footsteps echoing in empty hallways, tools vanishing and reappearing in strange places, and doors that lock or unlock on their own. One historian described climbing the tower at dusk and feeling a sudden weight on her shoulders, as if someone unseen was guiding her movements, though no one was there. Perhaps the most persistent apparition is that of a woman in the old lighthouse keeper's quarters, believed to be the young wife of the 19th century keeper. Witnesses describe her as appearing in the corner of a room, playing a spectral piano, her face etched with sadness. Some say she cannot leave the island until her story is fully told, a tragic figure repeating her final hours in a loop that stretches beyond the realm of time. The ghostly presence is not always malevolent. Many visitors describe an unsettling sense of being watched, but also of guidance. Subtle warnings when they are too close to the cliffs, sudden chills that prevent a fall into dangerous terrain, or whispers that draw attention to hidden hazards. It is as if the spirits of the island are bound to protect those who come after them, a reflection of the keeper's own devotion to duty in life. Paranormal investigations have recorded unexplained sounds, disembodied voices, chains dragging, and the occasional piano note. Cameras capture fleeting shadows that defy logical explanation. Even skeptics admit that the atmosphere of the island is unnerving. The isolation, combined with centuries of loss and tragedy, creates a palpable sense of presence that lingers long after one leaves. The combination of maritime disaster and human suffering seems to have etched itself into the very fabric of Seguin Island. The stone walls, the foggy paths, the cold gusts from the Atlantic. They all serve as the vessels for memory and spirit. Those who spend time there often speak of feeling watched, not in malice, but in sorrowful remembrance. Even today, long after automation removed human keepers, Seguin Island continues to breathe with its spectral inhabitants. Visitors report lights flickering in empty rooms, phantom footsteps pacing hallways, and sudden, unexplained cold spots. On certain nights, some swear they hear faint piano music drifting across the bluff, carried on the wind like a whisper from the past. For many, these experiences are more than ghost stories. They are a reminder that Seguin Island is a place of living memory, a keeper not only of ships' safety, but of the souls who never reached the shore. The island is haunted, yes, but not merely by fear. It is haunted by duty, tragedy, and the echoes of lives that have shaped its history forever. Seguin Island remained manned longer than many other lighthouses. Even into the 20th century, keepers and their families lived on the island, tending the great Fresnel lens and foghorn. In 1985, the lighthouse was finally automated and the last Coast Guard keepers departed. For the first time in nearly 2 centuries, Seguin stood without human guardians. Yet some say it was never truly abandoned. Volunteers and historians who now care for the site as part of the Friends of Seguin Island report strange happenings. Shadows flicker in empty rooms. The atmosphere, they say, feels heavy with memory. Guests sometimes cut visits short, unnerved by sensations they cannot explain. Today, Seguin Island Lighthouse is both a historic landmark and a place of mystery. Visitors can take boats to the island during summer, climb the old tower, and marvel at the still functioning Fresnel lens. The lighthouse is listed on the National Register of Historic Places, a testament to its enduring importance. Yet alongside its proud history runs the darker undercurrent of its legends. Guides and locals do not shy from sharing ghost stories, and paranormal investigators have sought evidence of spirits. Recordings have captured unexplained sounds, footsteps, voices, piano notes. Visitors have felt sudden cold spots or the unsettling feeling of being watched. The mix of history and hauntings makes Seguin Island one of the most fascinating lighthouses in America. It is a place where the past lingers tangibly, where sorrow and duty have soaked into the very stone. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of Seguin Island Lighthouse is not its ghosts, but its silence. The island is a time capsule of human endurance, where generations of keepers sacrificed comfort and sometimes their sanity to keep the light burning. The tragedies, the shipwrecks, the madness, the lonely deaths have become woven into its identity. The paranormal tales are not merely ghost stories, but echoes of real struggles endured by those who gave their lives to protect others at sea. In the end, Seguin Island Lighthouse is more than a haunted house by the sea. It is a monument to sacrifice, loneliness, and the fragile line between duty and despair. From its birth under George Washington's orders to its present role as a historic site, Seguin Island Lighthouse has stood against the relentless sea for more than 2 centuries. Its walls have seen joy and tragedy, life and death, sanity and madness. Its beam has saved countless sailors, even as others perished within sight of its light. And through it all, the island whispers its stories in the language of ghosts, the faint echo of a piano, the tread of unseen boots, the cries of shipwrecked sailors carried on the wind. Seguin Island Lighthouse remains what it has always been, beautiful, isolated, and haunted by memory.